It would seem that no matter what direction you took, you would sooner or later run into the chasm or the dead end. Even those who are obviously much older and wiser say there is no path beyond. How do any ever move on up to you? Good question. And then they go to the third part of this, which was what should have been there. And they go on. What should have been there where the chasm is to guide those who are now ready to go on up the path? What was perverted and changed at the very beginning to cause this chasm to exist? It was the one true church. We know, you of the church, temple, or whatever will stand and proclaim to be the one true church. God knows you've been doing it long enough already. As Book 5 will explain, you could take all the religious organizations, put them in a bag, shake out all the trivia and irrelevant philosophy and manipulation, and you would have what amounts to the same thing. That thing is not the one true church. What are we talking about then? The one true church. Ritualism, symbolism, mysticism, and they're saying for ritualism they're talking about the group. Symbolism they're talking about one-to-one. And mysticism they're talking about introspection. And part of that same connection is Catholics, Masons, and Rosicrucians in the Western world. And here they're saying Catholics meaning universal. Catholic means universal, all churches of all faiths, leaving their petty differences and joining to get the ritual needed. Masons here mean those who hold the key to the symbols and haven't lost the door. And the Rosicrucians mean those who understand mysticism and could teach same. If they were at the chasm to teach each part of three, man would go on. That is enough to give you the proper direction. Failing the integration of those three and the pride and arrogance of each group would dictate that failing. All three will fall, and a new church must take their place. And here they quote, O you who stand in arrogance as we step down from the last cycle, it is now your turn. You must change to meet the conditions of the new cycle or fall yourself. It is just that we are here to proclaim so. What does that mean? What did they say here? They said that what should have been here to bridge the chasm between those who were the moral good, the moral group, past the moral group should have been the one true church. What is the one true church? The one true church is ritualism, symbolism, mysticism. And for ritualism, they say those things that are connected to it. Ritualism is group and is Catholic. Catholic meaning the universal church, all church of all faiths, leaving their petty differences and joining to give the ritual. So in the ritual, you're talking about gathering together as a group, and you have the ritual, the ritualism, the gathering together and performing rituals. That was the need, the intent, the purpose of the church. The second part of it was symbolism. Symbolism one-to-one, one person to one symbol. The other connection was the Masons. The Masons here meant those, not the Masons necessarily, but that type, those who hold the key to symbols. And then they throw in, and haven't lost the door. Doesn't matter if you have the key if you don't know where the door is. And that's what's obvious. They're saying for the ritualism, they need a church where people get together and go through the ritual. For symbolism, kind of a one-on-one thing, you look at the symbol and it has meaning to you, or you're taught the meaning of the one-to-one thing, and the Masons are an example of it. They have the key. If they haven't lost the door, they'd be part of that group. Anybody that holds the keys to the symbols and understands what they unlock, and can teach same. So then we have the ritualism and symbolism. Then the last part of that one true church is the mysticism. And the example given church is composed of three things: ritualism, symbolism, and mysticism. And if you could get those who have the real parts together, you would have the one true church. And then they say that is what is needed, and that's what we should have to fill the chasm. But failing the integration of those three, here they say, and the pride and arrogance of each group would dictate that failing, all three would fall, and then a new church must take their place, or a new system, or a new something. What are they saying? What are they saying? They go to the quote, "O you who stood in arrogance as we stepped down from the last cycle, it is now your turn. You must change to meet the conditions of this new cycle or fall yourself. It is just that we are here to proclaim it so." That's a quotation that they give. "O you who stood in arrogance as we stepped down in the last cycle." Who stepped down in the last cycle? All of those of the old religion as Christianity came in, weren't they from the old cycle? Didn't the Christians, didn't the great fathers of Christianity stand in arrogance as the Druids and the worshippers of Mother Earth, and all same came down and Christianity came into its cycle? And they're saying, "Oh, you who stood in arrogance as we had to step down from the last cycle, it's now your turn. Christianity, it's your turn. You must change to meet the conditions of this new cycle, or you fall yourselves." And there is justice in the fact that we're here to proclaim it so. So what they're saying is that we're coming to a new time period, and that the church and the Masons and the Rosicrucians and the understanding of those things that they hold as keys, they need to clarify and refine and get it to its reality, and they need to join together and become that bridge that bridges that chasm. And having that accomplished, they will go on. If they do not accomplish that, if their pride and arrogance will not let them join together, they're going to fall, just like the Druids and the worshippers of Earth and the various religions prior to Christianity fell. It's now their turn. They have to change or fall. And those who gave us this information were indicating that the pride and arrogance of that group, or those groups, probably dictates they'll fall. And so then they go on, and they're going on in level 2 now. And so we are left with the hope that the chasm will be bridged and we can go on. We are left with the hope that the blocks may be seen for what they are. We are left with the hope that you will see each person for what he is, and no more than you, and no less. See that his power is no more than yours, and no less, save what you give him. There is one thing that must be said before we close this part of the work. Each person who reads this chapter instinctively tries to determine where he and she falls on the U. Some came close, many deceive themselves about that too. Those who fall on the left side of the U near the top or the middle look at what is in store for them and ask if there's any way to bypass this path in a hurry. Who is going to look forward to sliding into the gutter and all that entails? There's a way to slide by at least the physical part of the path. The way was called love in the older writings. As with most important things, the word has taken on a far different meaning in these days. The word which would better describe love, as it was used in the past, is empathy. The word as used here would mean putting yourself into the situation so completely that you are the person experiencing, understanding, feeling, knowing. What did they say? When people read this thing about the you, they always want to know where they fall in it. Many deceive themselves as to where they fall. What else did they say? If you're way over on the left-hand side, like in the do-good group, is there any way to kind of slide past all this gutter stuff and get on with it? And they say, yes, there is. There's a thing that back in the older times was called love, and since the word love has been distorted horribly, now they will use the word empathy. Empathy meaning putting yourself totally into the situation so that you are the person who's experiencing the gutter, the aloneness, the feeling of being alone and sliding over and realizing that people are important. You can do it with empathy. You don't have to physically go through it. Another one of those little things that's thrown in. That's a key to a very big concept. Now they're going to go to level 3 and say kind of the same thing. And they say, it would seem that the need in karma is that you experience a condition again and again until you know it emotionally and it becomes a part of you. At this point, the condition is removed and you're free to go on to the next condition. And they say, you have surely seen your friends meet a condition over and over again with just minor variations. Think of when it is that he or she finally overcame the condition and went on. Wasn't it when they got it emotionally and it became a part of their operating life rather than the theoretical life? This being so, you can see the possibility of using empathy as a tool to get it before the condition comes again. You could even empathize with a neighbor or a friend and learn the condition before it knocks on your door. And they say this again is a pointing out or pointing to a direction. Take a little time to ponder this concept. You understand that they're saying you don't have to go through these horrible things that you see around you personally. If you see them and understand what it is that's trying to be taught empathetically, you can go on without having to meet the condition. The object is to understand it. With karma, the whole thing is to understand that these people, these things that are happening to you teach you lessons. Learn the lesson, and they don't come again. Do it with empathy, and they don't come at all. And that's what they're trying to teach you. So they go on and say, Christ was a true empath. He tried through all his mission to get people to see that love, or what we now call empathy, was the answer. He was able to travel the entire you in one lifetime using empathy. His statement, I am the way, might take on a new meaning when it is understood that his way was the empath way. Empathy is the bridge, a gift given by those who changed the system and taught to you by Christ and others. It bridges from where you are to where you must go without the physical repetition of the learning. Faster and easier because you have focused on the learning of the lesson rather than the fighting of the condition. Inward rather than outward, which is where all battles are fought and won anyway. So actually there's a pretty big focus on empathy. They say that you can learn your lesson faster and easier because you're focused on learning, not on fighting the condition. That you're focusing on doing it inward rather than outward, where all the battles are fought anyway, and where all the battles are won anyway. And so, this empath, which was called love at one time, and I guess would be considered love too. You have empathy for your neighbor who lost her child, or his child, and you really get into that and understand what it means, and understand the lesson behind it. You may never have to go through it. Alcoholic in the gutter, and you understand what he's really going through and why, you may never have to go through it. And you can go on with any condition that's unfavorable in man's view. These lessons that you have to learn, you empathize with them, and you begin to understand that that's a way. That's a way to get through them. I mean, you've learned the lesson, you understand the lesson, you've dealt with the lesson, you weren't fighting the condition, you didn't even have to go through the condition, you learned. So there is a shortcut. If Christ went across that you, down to bottom, down, up in one lifetime, he learned all those lessons with empathy. It can be done. He is the way. Then they go on, and they're going on at level 2, understanding again. And so there is a way to shortcut to you and learn the lessons faster. The way is empathy. Learn what it is and use it. Or dive into the muck, or life, if you will. If all this rings true and you understand it, then get up and get going. For even though time doesn't exist, you don't have forever. Those who insist on playing the game of the monkey may yet get left here, even though we would all know the loss greatly. Father created the soul as a thing apart from himself and with free will. Father cannot now take away free will and save the game players, nor of course can we. You are free to stay. Will you? And that's the end of book 1. And the only thing left is my discussion. I told you that I would be talking about when I found the book, or when they gave me the first part of the book. I was kind of astounded. But first I'm going to read the part that is at the very end of the chapter, what I thought about that last part. And I said, the foregoing is about as different a view of life as I have ever seen. I don't remember ever seeing anything even remotely like it anywhere. My first glimpse was to determine where I fell on the U, just as they suggested. That, as so many have found, is not always such a good idea. It seems that an honest look at where I fell, by definition, on the U, put me in an area not as far along as I had hoped. They did say that some of us are not where we think, and we could be further along. Still, the U does give us a device to measure our progress and a goal to shoot for. It is as if someone were taking us by the hand and showing us what to expect in our life. One way or another, we are going to go through the U from the top to the bottom and back to the top on the other side. You can see the steps on the way and know we have been there or are going to be there if we don't stop to play games. That makes us all fellow travelers on a very difficult path. Then they gave us the gift of empathy. The part about empathy being the historical love explains something that has bothered me. The Bible is always saying that love is the most important of the good traits. It makes more sense now that I can understand the why of it. We can actually get from one side of the U to the other in a single lifetime. Failing that, we can certainly learn to save ourselves from the worst of lessons by using empathy. Again, the progress of our life seems to be up to us, our choice. So what have we learned in Book 1? We have learned that we really are a soul. We have learned why soul was created and how it arrived here. We have learned how the soul fell into this place called Earth and how it got trapped. We have learned that the laws were changed to free the soul and that man became the carrier or vehicle of the soul. We have learned that man, as a race, has traveled the common path to get out of the trap of Earth. And finally, we have learned that there's a shortcut in the form of empathy. In Book 2, they say the intention will be to better explain the thing called man. You will learn better what you are and how you really work in relation to the soul and monkey. You will also learn more about the laws and control of your life. And so, they're ready to go on to Book 2 and discuss the man, the monkey, and what he is in relation to the soul, and give you a much better view of man. You've kind of seen the soul get created. You've kind of seen the soul come here to this beautiful jewel Earth. You've seen it get enthralled with the living things here and actually focus on them so hard that they kind of lost their awareness. You've seen them get trapped in the Earth cycles. You've seen the laws changed here on Earth so that man had a way out, and they gave you as a common course for getting out, and gave you kind of a shortcut in the form of empathy. And now they're going to take a real close look at man the monkey and man the man and just define them for you so that you understand better what it is that you're really in, the two parts. Chapter 2, or Book 2, 2 parts. Man, the soul, man, the monkey. The only thing left then before we start Book 2 is this part that I talked about, which was what it is that I felt after I had read Book 1. And this is what I said. This is exactly how I found the first book to read, with, I might add, the same impact. telling you how this work happened to fall into my hands rather than someone else more deserving or better able to understand it would take a book in itself. Most wouldn't believe it anyway, since most of us seem to believe that only someone far different from ourselves could have anything worthwhile happen to them. We feel that those people who accomplish the great deeds of life are a breed far different from us. Perhaps it isn't true. Perhaps if we want something bad enough, each one of us could accomplish the impossible. How was it for me? I had a burning desire to know why what I was taught about how life worked wasn't true. There were so many things that just weren't explained by what I learned in school, college, or life as taught by my elders. The good didn't get their reward, and the bad didn't get their punishment, at least not in this life. I wasn't blind. I could see that life wasn't fair, and I began to see that life didn't work the way I was being taught. Then came college and a chance to learn what the cream of our student crop thought about life. Surely they, in their intellectual, big city ways, would set me straight. I understand I came from a small community. I really thought that part of the problem was that I came from a small community and I wasn't getting the facts. I mean, these were stodgy, old, set in their way people from a small town in the Midwest, and they just didn't have it. And when I went to college, there was these big city boys from New York, and I knew they were going to say, oh, okay, you've been taught all this foolish stuff, now we're going to set you straight. And I went on to say, surely those destined to run our country through the government or corporations would know how things worked. They didn't. Worse, they were morally bankrupt in my eyes, and they weren't at all interested in the whys of life. And then I commented that you got to remember I was an idealistic youth at the time. And I went on. I found myself in my mind placed in the center of an island with paths going out in all directions from where I sat. I didn't know where I was, nor what was going on. Then from one of those paths came a man who said that I must go with him and learn the game of life. Finally, somebody's going to show me. So I went with him, and soon came to a group of people that were playing football. Okay, the guy brought me out this path, and he's going to show me the game of life. Here we go, football. And I did. I struggled, and I learned the rules, and I gained the necessary skills physically to be able to play well. As I was struggling to learn football, I noticed quite by accident there was another game going on down another path right next to ours. Being curious, I naturally walked over to see what the game was. What I found was a different group playing tennis. The rules were completely different, as were the skills needed. This puzzled me greatly, and I asked them why they were playing tennis when football was obviously the game of life. They looked at me as if I was crazy. It had never occurred to them that there might be another game on the island, or, if there was, it was just a waste of time since their game of tennis was the only true game. I went back to the center of the island. What was going on here? Obviously, I didn't know enough, so I began to investigate. As I traveled each path, I found the same thing, a new and different game believed to be the one and only game of life. Back to the center of the island to think this puzzle through. Sitting there, I reviewed the problem. If they all think their game is the only true game of life, then who's right? What are the real rules of the game? What is the real game of life? What skills should I be developing to win this game? What good was it to learn the rules of football when the true game of life was tennis? What good to learn the rules of tennis if the true game was hockey? That was the puzzle of this island. As I sat there thinking, it soon came to me that if there was a true game, there must be a means of determining what it was. I went over all the things I had learned that might help in this matter. In time, the only thing that would hold against observation, thought, and trial were the rules Christ gave. Ask, and it will be given you. Seek, and you will find. I reasoned that if we truly have free will here, we must be able to understand the choices fully. Without complete knowledge, there can be no true choice, and thus no free will. And I wanted to explain that. It becomes obvious that if there is no free will here, then you must just pass through these experiences and have no control over the path and direction of life. That is the crux of all attempts to control our life in any way. If we have free will, in any act, we must have full knowledge of the consequences of that act. Failing that, no matter what they tell you, you don't have free will. That's the definition of free will. Free will is the ability to choose a path or direction of action with full knowledge of the consequences. All else is a sham and a fraud. Therefore, there must be knowledge available to me about this problem of which game to play, or I am just to experience and not to ask questions. See, one way or the other. If I have free will and I get to choose which choose the understanding and play the real game of life, then somewhere there has to be an answer as to what is the real game of life. If there isn't an answer to that, then there is no free will, and you can be fooled into, or what I always say, go with the wind. So the knowledge must be there. I couldn't find it in just talking to people. I couldn't find it in readings and things, so I asked. Because that's what Christ said, ask, and it'll be given you. So I asked. And I said, I asked, vowing not to stop until it all fit. A huge task, you say, and I'll be the first to admit that I was biting off more than I can chew. Still, 20 years later, I'm in possession of this work. Christ said, ask and you shall receive. Now I think we have no idea just how much power lies in that little statement. Actually, after reading this work, I'm beginning to understand just what Christ and all the other wise brothers of the past were trying to tell us. More of that later. Let's get on with this work. I sometimes get to ask questions of the author of this work being presented. This gives me a better idea of what's being written and why. I'll try to share those questions and answers with you as we go along. The first question, of course, was probably your same question, and it was my first question, too. Who are you? The answer was the forerunner of many answers quite the same in character. It took me quite a while to get used to the impact. Let's see how you do. And this is a quote after I said, who are you? They said, who we are is not important. You only ask out of curiosity and a need to know our credentials. You have been trained to question the relative authority of anyone who tells you anything. You have been trained well. Now you question our authority. We will give you this. Put what we say to the test of life. Find all the flaws and all those things that would validate what we say. Put them in the balance and then match any other system against ours. No degrees, no credentials, no letters of introduction, just something to be validated in the laboratory of life. I have done what they asked, and my conclusion, it can best be explained by the fact that I now capitalize all reference to them. Who are they? This is what they said. Those who know, know. Those who don't will in some light. And I'll bet I heard that a few hundred times. And they said, I have to understand that, and here's the quote again, many different people will read this. Some will feel lost in all the complexities, while others will feel they're being talked down to. Those who know must be given something they understand, as we teach those who know little. There is no way to explain to all what those who know in a few books. Allow us to show the ones who know that we have walked the path to the end and returned. For the rest of us who don't know all the ins and outs of all the subjects, there is still much to learn that will change our life. As one who read this work said, I don't understand all that I read, but I think my subconscious must, because my life is changing for the better. So what they're saying is, what they said to me basically was, I'm not going to give you any letters of introduction, and I'm not going to give you our degrees, our college degrees. I'm not going to give you any credentials. I'm just going to say, use what we say in the laboratory of life and see what parts are true and see what parts work and see what parts don't. And then take that and match it against any other system that is presented to you. Any other system that man can hand you, any other religious system, any philosophical system, match the two. See which one's truer. See which one works best. See which one best explains life. When you do that, you will know what our credentials are. And I did. I've read all 3 books. I've read all 4 books. I've written all 4 books. I have matched what they present against all the other systems that I'm aware of. And as I said, my conclusion was I capitalized the we. I do have a fairly good idea who the we are. Maybe in Book 5 that'll be explained a little bit. But irregardless, no matter who they are, the information is there. You can do the same thing. Take what they say. See how it stacks up against life. See how it measures up against what you see out there in the real world day to day. When you go to work, when you go to school, when you do what it is that you do in like your social situations. Do the things that they are describing real? Are they telling you something that you didn't see before? Did you not see it before because the foundation of your understanding with some other philosophical or religious concept that isn't as true? You see what they're saying? Measure what they say against your reality. Measure what they say against what you see out there. Measure what they say against life. And then take a look at what you're using and take a look at what they're saying and which one of them is closer to what's going on. Which one's closer to reality? Which one's closer to truth?